Christmas time, mistletoe and goats is a song I imagine they sing during the festive season in Sweden. Now of course that isn't true, but it is true to say that Sweden as a country does have some rather peculiar goat-based Christmas traditions. And in this video today I'm going to be taking you through the history of something known as the GävleBocken. I believe that's how you pronounce